Uh, All right, we're going to get started here in a minute. All right, good morning, everyone. I call this meeting to order. It is 7:35 a.m. on April 25th, 2022. Will the secretary please do roll call?
Might need the master switch on.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right. Bar, Graff.
Strasser here.
Boy, here.
Harris here, all present. All right. Are there any corrections to the minutes for the March 28th meeting? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Well, there are no general agenda items, so next on the agenda, we will move to monthly presentations. And first up, monthly presentations of the Fire Department operations from Chief Bartek. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. April was an interesting month for us. I got to travel to the Center for Domestic Preparedness in Anniston, Alabama, and I took a class there called DREAM, and it was all about disaster-related exposure monitoring, and this is post 9/11 type of a class in which they've identified that responders after 9/11 are dying of varied cancers and other things 20 plus years later, and how do they determine where that origin came from. And so the class is a pilot class. They're hoping to roll things like this out throughout the country, in which us as departments or us as organizations in this community, when we have large-scale disasters, we begin immediate disaster monitoring of all of our responders, whether they're contractors or paid responders from our municipalities. It was a fascinating class. It was filled with epidemiologists. Well, I shouldn't say filled with them. We had 2 epidemiologists, we had public health, we had emergency managers, and a couple of fire chiefs from all over the country. So I really enjoyed that. Appreciate the support of the mayor and the community for allowing me to be away from my office for a week for some really in-depth training at one of the most elite sites that the country has for a training there. I highly encourage many of my staff now to go there, to travel to that site for future training. They're really cutting edge on a lot of the stuff that's new and emerging threats to us. Our monthly report, if you took a look at that, you see some interesting data that I wanted to report in there. I wanted to report a year's worth of data of our Phoenix G2 system, which is our alerting system. We had installed that new, and we put it into fire station number 2. We immediately identified that it had a significant impact on our operations, especially on the dispatch side. It's very much easier for the dispatcher to take the phone call, to be listening to the caller, typing in the data, and even without even having to pause in the conversation, once they have the nature of the call, the address of the call, what's needed, they can hit dispatch, and we are automatically dispatched with a automated voice. We call her Samantha, that talks to our department and dispatches it. I'd cut that. If you look at that chart, I should have done a little better job of explaining how we look at data. I prefer to look at the 90th percentile fractile time, not just the average. I mean, a lot of times we talk about what our average response time is and whatnot. We're really more concerned with what we're doing 90% of the time. So the bulk of the time, what are we doing? And you look at that 90% fractile time, and this system has pushed made us about 90 seconds quicker, which is it's a huge impact. That's 1.5 minutes faster that we're on scene assisting people in our community. So that's a very interesting thing. Jared Thompson reported on I've asked him to highlight these varied EMS cases for us to look at each month. He highlighted a code in which we had a patient that was pulseless non-breathing, and the crew, our automated CPR device, did not fit the patient due to the size of the patient, and so our crew had to do hands-only CPR or hands-on CPR for 47 minutes, and they had a near 94% on the chest time, which means that 94% of the entire time that they were with that patient, someone was actively doing CPR. So that's a huge monumental effort. When we see that inside of calls, typically we see the survivability rate drastically increase. We see our numbers still climbing. We hope at the 2-year mark to see even a better gauge of where we've gone since we instituted our new ACR protocol, our advanced cardiac resuscitation protocol, which we modeled after the Rialto, California cardiac response. Right now, the national average survivability of a pulseless non-breathing patient in the country is about 6%. Today, right here in Wausau, as we said, about 14%. So we're more than double the national average of survivability in pulseless non-breathing patients. So that's the kind of data I like to bring to you in these reports. If you haven't seen it in there, I encourage you to read those things from Jared Thompson. He's really highlighting some of the great work, and we can prove it in data. Before I get into the recruitment retention part, was there any questions on the annual report, the monthly report? Go ahead.
In there, Deputy Chief Kopp was referring to one of the fires, I think in the last month, and during that fire there were 3 units that were engaged elsewhere, and he appeared to be very thankful that they were able to extinguish the fire given that they didn't have the manpower that they should have in that situation. Can you shed a little bit more light on that and maybe how that will change with the additional firefighters that we're adding?
Sure. So that's unfortunately very common for us, is that we do have, because of the busyness of our EMS system, that's 90% of our business is EMS. When we do strike a structure fire, which is more rare for us, and every department in the country, that we find that all of our units, both some of those engines, and that was the case there, and the ambulances already engaged in EMS care. So the case in which I just talked about, Jared Thompson, that requires an engine company in addition to the ambulance in order to have enough manpower to successfully execute that call. We don't need physically that fire engine there, but that's what carries the extra hands, the crew. And so they were engaged in that type of operations when that fire alarm struck, is what I believe. I'd have to reread that report and Deputy Chief Kopp's remarks specifically to that fire, but that's what we're seeing. What will the impact of the additional firefighters be on that? Is that now, rather than arriving with the first arriving unit would only have 2 firefighters on it, which would be a lieutenant and an engineer, they would at least have a third. They would have a third party on board that engine, which would be a firefighter paramedic in the rear seat, who is actively en route to the call, putting on their SCBA and their turnout gear, and then they've got an entry crew of the lieutenant and the firefighter upon arrival. You've got an engineer at the pump, and as soon as a command element arrives, and an additional unit, because we have to have 2 people in for 2 people out, we can assemble that much more quickly than we could without. And so we continue on that track. Actually, tomorrow night, I've requested a little more than $700,000 of ARPA funding to fund the first 3 of the additional 12 firefighters for the first 2.5 years. Of course, the recruitment of those individuals will be another difficult task. We are working on that. I can bridge into that when I get into the recruitment retention. So will the additional 12 firefighters have an impact on a call like that? Absolutely. It will allow us to make faster entry if we've got to make a save or someone's trapped. We're going to have the ability to do that much more quickly with the additional staff. And it's a lower stress level and a higher safety margin when we have appropriately staffed engines. Ideally, we would have 4 people on each of the engines, but I just don't see that as being fiscally available to this community for quite a time.
Just to be clear though, when you show up with 2, nobody's going in.
Nobody's going in. But we set up the fire scene. So we make water, which means find a hydrant. We do the 360 size up, find the homeowner. There's a lot that occurs during that period of time. And then they can make an exterior attack. So if you go to that call that I highlighted from, I think it was November 10th of last year that we put the video out, it's out on YouTube. You see that very dramatically in that, because it's a very exterior fire with the fire blowing out the garage. You see the first doula lieutenant, which is Brian Boutnick, deploy a 2.5-inch hose line by himself, and he can do that from the yard. We don't allow entry into a building, but from the exterior we can do some firefighting operations. But if the fire isn't showing on the exterior, we're not opening windows to extinguish it. We need that closed tight until we're properly prepared to ventilate and then actively engage in firefighting. So, yeah, it really hampers us greatly, the staffing levels.
Any further discussion? Questions?
Education. Great that we do it. Are we spreading the educational dollar among our staff so they continue to be developed? I mean, most of the time outside seminars, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Actually, yeah, I can report on that. And maybe I need to put that into a separate one we could talk about. About a year ago, so it would have been, I think, January of 2021, we purchased a new software program called Vector Solutions. And that has greatly assisted our training program in the alignment of all the different crews having similar training. Our training calendar is so packed right now that every day that our crews aren't actively engaged in emergency operations or on calls, during the daytime they're engaged in training operations. Today they were talking about hose testing. There's other things going on. That's not much of a training, but it's required for us to do that annually. Typically the crews turn it into training for the younger firefighters, deployment of hose lines and things like that as they're going about that type of training. The vast variety of training that we offer to maintain our licensures in both paramedic, firefighting, hazardous materials, confined space rescue, high angle rescue, swift water rescue, ice rescue, water rescue, just outright water rescue. It takes an enormous amount of time. And so the addition, if you recall, 2 years ago under Tracy Kajar's leadership, we recruited and hired a training division chief. That single individual has made a monumental impact in the preparedness of our people. Actually, right now this week, he's out at the largest fire department instructors conference in the world. He's in Indianapolis training at the FDIC, the Fire Department Instructors Conference, which will be probably at peak about 30,000 firefighters all in downtown Indianapolis, all training on firefighting. And so he's there all week this week, and I can't wait. Well, when he comes back, he's probably going to have about $100,000 worth of equipment that he wants, which I'm not going to have the money for. But he's also going to have some great stuff to bring to our people, which is why we send him to those conferences. And we're hoping to expand that even further. So through our software program and through the addition of our training division chief that we made 2 years ago, we have made some real leaps and bounds. I really feel confident that we're best preparing our people for them. And we listen to our people when they feel like they need more training in certain areas. The problem that gets to be is that they feel real thinly spread between all those disciplines. And so we have to listen to them about the areas of their needs, make sure that we're addressing it. Recruitment retention, we ready to talk about that?
Yep.
So recruitment retention, so the Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs is very active at the state legislative level. They come to the chiefs every year and ask for what the largest problems that you're facing and how can we help. Maybe at the state legislative level, number one for all the Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs is recruitment retention. So this year is no different. We've had a couple of retirements. We've had now, just in the last month, we've had 2 resignations. We've had one firefighter paramedic that's leaving the trade entirely. He's going to go become a conservation warden for the DNR. We had a short-term employee that we brought on in January. He had come from the Kenosha Fire Department. He wanted to go back to the Kenosha Fire Department. He did not cite reasons within the department. It was more of a change in his wife's education, the way it sounds. But regardless, those are holes that we now have to fill. Last month, we interviewed 3 candidates that will be starting on May 9th. I asked HR, and they quickly popped up a 2-week quick recruitment because I knew I was going to have these openings. And when I last talked with Jennifer and HR, we'd only recruited 2 people that were tangible for hire through that process. So this week we'll work on arranging interviews for them. So there becomes the problem is that when I do get permission to begin hiring the additional firefighters, where am I going to find them? So we're planning on a multi-pronged, solution plan. The biggest part of it going on right now, Jeremy Kopp is leading, and that's the recruitment retention effort of the Wausau and Marathon County youth. We have been very actively, more active than the high schools and other career recruitment type events that we can get involved in. Probably most notably, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point Wausau campus held a career day where rural students from all around the area could come in, and we had a very big presence there. We had several pieces of apparatus set up there. We had 2 tables set up there. We engaged in a number of Marathon County youth and talked about the career potential that is involved in working in the fire and EMS service. Since then, and we've been doing a lot of advertising in our social media. We have a career night coming up on May 19th, which is filling very quickly. Right now, I talked to Jeremy before I left this morning. He's seeing about 3 to 5 high schoolers take him up on his offer to come down for a tour and a visit with him in his office. So there's the long-term solution. I believe that the seeds that we're planting today, right now, will help us in that 2 to 3 year mark, but these youth need an education before they come to us. So what's going to happen if we get permission to hire all 12 of these additional firefighters? How are we going to bridge into that? Well, that's been the big debate. There's just not enough firefighter candidates throughout the state in order to make that sizable increase, especially when you see other departments. Pleasant Prairie just passed a referendum for hiring an additional 12 firefighters and 4 police officers. And so there's added positions throughout the state that you're seeing from all these department expansions and staffing. So we've been in conversations with North Central Technical College, and they are willing to offer us a paramedic, Wausau Fire Department paramedic intensive program that we would like to institute next year. So what we would like to do is probably do another midsummer recruitment here to see if we can pick up a few qualified firefighter paramedics. And then this fall, we'd like to advertise for firefighter 1 and EMT basics and build a sizable list from that. And then when we hire them, we're going to end up spending the first year training them as paramedics and the firefighter 2 level. We believe by reducing that educational requirement and being, paid basically to get your education as a firefighter paramedic will bear a big impact on our volume of students, or qualified candidates that we see apply for us. Now that means that they're not going to be able to go to work for us on the street for that period of time. It won't be till the fall of 2023 that we see the impact from that decision to do that. But we really don't have another option. We need to pursue this. And so there's a lot of layers of stratification underneath that of what that program looks like. The biggest is that we needed a partner for education. We needed a lead instructor and a technical college that would get behind us on that. And North Central Technical College is doing that for us. So we don't know, there's a lot of questions there about what that program is going to look like. Most likely it's going to be a combination of NTC instructors and Wausau Fire Department instructors. But for the dozen or more candidates that are lucky enough to get that application and get that opportunity, it's going to be a fantastic opportunity. Of course, we're going to need to tie it to, some conditions of ongoing employment, or repayment of the education if they choose to leave us. But I think that those are all things that we can easily accomplish within basically the next 2 quarters of the year to have that plan for that fourth quarter advertisement and recruitment. What we may ask the city to is to carry a few extra bodies into that beginning of 2023 to get them into the training. We anticipate several retirements at the beginning of next year or mid next year, and it would make sense for the city to make the investment up front to have those replacement individuals already in place. I'm not sure if the city budget will allow that or not, but we may make that request depending on how many we estimate that we're going to lose via retirement or resignation. So recruitment retention remains one of our number 1 problems that we're dealing with on an everyday basis. Jeremy Kopp is doing an outstanding job of connecting with any opportunity that we have to meet someone that might want to join our trade and then pulling them in. And he's kind of an infectious guy, so once he gets in their skin, they get really enthusiastic because he's very enthusiastic for this line of work also. And so I think that, and you guys have all heard my story, that my career path in the fire service started with a conversation at Central, circa March 1991. I stopped in to find out what a career in the fire service might be, and now 30 years later, I stand in front of you as the chief of the department. So I think that we can't sell ourselves short on that type of personal, come in and talk to us. In fact, I had a young man who is in the National Guard, who just came out of the National Guard, very excited about a career in the fire service. And we had him down. I had already looked up when the next EMT basic class was going to be because he seemed to be a highly motivated individual. He left my office, got into the EMT basic class. I just checked in on him last week, and he's very excited about pursuing the career. He's already got enrolled for a Firefighter 1 class this fall. That's the kind of individual that we could recruit this fall, and he could be a part of the big recruitment for next year and going through that training. So I know I made a lengthy statement about recruitment retention in the department there. I plan on bringing maybe more brief updates as we go along here as far as the openings that we have and the troubles that we're seeing and the solutions that we're coming up with. I welcome any ideas, any input from, of course, the commission or anyone in the community who thinks that they've got an idea how we can improve in that area. So that's my report.
Got a question on the report.
Sure.
There was an issue about firefighters not able in their off time to go to a volunteer fire department?
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
these part-time? Can you explain that and what the issue is? And is it just one person, or is it
No.
a situation that is causing us concern?
Yeah, and it's something that, it's a double-edged sword, because allowing one of our career firefighters to work as a firefighter in an outside work capacity has some limitations to me for workers' comp insurance and other things like that, where they get a disease
Absolutely.
process like that. However, the feds disagree with me, and so do many organizations in the state and other levels. So if we were to get, say, this FEMA SAFER grant, the Staffing for Effective Fire and Emergency Response grant that I've requested for 9 of the 12 firefighters, on page 73 of that notice of funding, there's a paragraph that addresses that we are not, as a municipality, if we were to get firefighters under that grant, allowed to discriminate against anyone that chooses to go into a volunteer firefighting operation when they are not at their work. And what you see is a trend moving away from the old school thinking that I've had on that, and we do have contractual language covering that, to this allowing the firefighters to still volunteer in their days off. I think that there's a lot of layers of questions that need to be answered before we change that. We've got negotiations coming up. I started tracking the number of individuals that have brought this to me as an issue, and I'm at 14 now. 14 individuals, including one of the candidates that we just lost, that we had recruited, we were going to bring to you for an interview. He went to a different department, and one of the reasons is he could stay on his volunteer department where he's at and still work professionally in that other area. So while it's a difficult subject for us to discuss, I think we need to bring our workers' comp insurer on the conversation. It's in the contract, so it needs to go through contract negotiations. But it does seem to be the national trend to move away from discriminating against firefighters that want to do volunteer operations on their days off. And that extends to wildland. I think that that's really where you see it, is the wildland firefighting community demanding that they can get people in their volunteer departments, to be able to be employed full-time and still volunteer. Wisconsin's fire and EMS system is majority, rural. There's only about 3,700 professional firefighters in the state. The remainder are all rural responders. And so I think that we need to keep that in mind going forward with the discussions. So that's why I put that in the report, Bill.
Would that attract more firefighters? A lot of the Maine and these guys and gals that are doing part-time, would that attract them?
That's what we're hearing, is that the departments in the close, more metro area of Wausau, Riverside, Safer, Maine, you name it, may have candidates that want to stay volunteering on those departments and work for us full-time. You don't know until you advertise and you see those candidates come our direction. I think that it's something that if we get the federal grant, we've got to remove that. We've got to remove that requirement in order to be compliant with the grant. Do we just remove it for the 9 individuals that we identify as hired underneath that grant, when FEMA's really asking us to remove it overall from our department? That's the question that we need to answer.
Well, I hope if we do that all of the details are worked out as far as insurance liability.
There's a lot that I don't know about it. I'd like to see our workers' comp insurer's opinion on that process. Really, it's protection of the employee that I'm concerned about. Infectious disease exposure being probably one of the biggest ones.
Even taxpayer.
Cancer exposure. Well, Wisconsin has got a heart and a lung law that, if you've been a firefighter for more than 5 years and you develop lung cancer, it's going to be guaranteed that it's from the job, is what they've got that termed. Do they give that up if they're also a volunteer firefighter? I don't know. Those are good questions.
Those are big issues.
They are big issues, and I'm willing to explore it, but I'm also very cautious about it.
First of all, I appreciate your ideas around recruitment. I mean, we're all struggling with that, so kudos to you and good luck.
Yeah, our team, Jeremy Kopp, Dave Briggs, and Jared Thompson really deserve the credit there. This recruitment event that we've got May 19th, look at our YouTube, our Facebook page, or our Instagram page. Now we're on Instagram. I think we're on Twitter. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask my staff if we're on Twitter right now. But they came out with some specific advertisement for that to the youth, and you see, a very excited Jeremy Kopp wanting to connect with your youth, and we're seeing some really good buy-in from that. And just watching those three orchestrate that event at the UWSP Wausau campus, and then getting out into schools on every opportunity that they can. Of course, I always try to help out as much as I can, but the staff deserves the credit. I don't. And I appreciate the kudos.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my question is on this external training that you went to, and
Yeah.
you said you're encouraging other members of the department to
Yes.
do that. How do you plan for that, and how do you budget? Like, how do you allow more people to go externally for training?
Yeah.
Which I could see the benefit of.
Yeah, so it's fairly easy with our 40-hour administrative staff, because the only thing that we're really missing is them in the office. Typically, they get, some work done in lunch breaks and evenings. That's what I was doing while I was there. There's no overtime implications for it. The problems become when we want to, say, send someone like that who's on the line, a battalion chief or a lieutenant, then there's an overtime implication for that. And so I've got to budget in advance. So if I've got an employee that comes to me with, hey, I'd like to take this class, we can look ahead at 2023, when's that scheduled, maybe make some budget adjustments to allow that individual to attend that training. They do some phenomenal things there. It's FEMA's Center for Domestic Preparedness. It's on a military site. It's connected to a military base. They have a full-fledged hospital there that they do training inside. They've got Disaster Alley, which is a huge building. I should have put some pictures in there. It's got a 5-car subway with a couple of hundred individuals that are mannequins that are moulaged up to simulate a mass casualty incident occurring on a subway. They had us working live in there on a post-disaster response. It's really a neat site, and so I'm going to continue to encourage that. We've got a lot of training opportunities that are free to us. So the training is free. They pay for the meal plan. They pay for the flights. All I have to do is get the individual scheduled, and then somehow backfill their work if they're on the line, or if it's someone on the office staff. Like our training division chief really should be looking at some of these things, and our EMS division chief. So it's no cost to the city, aside from the loss of the employee for the week while they're there.
Is this overtime issue, is that something that could be negotiated in the union contract?
Yeah, everything's negotiable in the union
Well,
contract.
I mean, realistically, this is our procedure. Once again, these things have to be handled before you triggers.
Yeah, and there's specific language speaking to that, if it's a mandatory off-duty training, that they will be paid overtime. So if I were to make it mandatory, they would have to. If they want to go voluntarily, then it changes it slightly.
The big deal is that you're developing your career as voluntary. Mandatory is one thing, volunteer is another.
Yeah, something that we can try to address in the upcoming contract negotiation, sure.
I guess again, I think I echo a lot of the comments, and a lot of great solutions and ways to do a lot of outreach in our community. So I thank you for that. Did it have a question in terms of recruitment? Has there been any efforts in looking at our veterans in terms of some of the I know there are some young veterans, in terms of Veterans Day, Memorial Day, I know there were big events during that time, and they have a booth at some of those places, or to work with some of the reservist centers and those types. Those usually are, I found to be good people in terms of that, for these types of positions.
I totally agree with you. We have some outstanding veterans that work for our organization, and we continue to, try to appeal to any recruit, especially veterans. And we have looked at some programs. I can't say we've implemented one. We looked at a program from another community called Boots to Badges, where it was a public safety recruitment to both police, fire, and EMS. We have not engaged in anything like that. Of course, we're always present at the different veteran events that we're invited to, but we had not thought about setting up, say, some booths or something like that, or trying to connect with however these veterans are getting discharged. Where's a way that we can connect with them? We have not set up a conduit like that. I think that would be outstanding if we did. I need to look at it. The National Guardsman that came in to see me is a local youth to the community, and he was connected to me through the Among American Center. And so we've built some of those inroads where we've got some of these community partners that have a contact with the youth. Yiling contacts with this youth to say, I'd really like to become a firefighter paramedic. we've built a relationship. He refers the individual to me, and now we've got, him into a training program. So I think that that's where a lot of it is connecting with the area people, especially veterans that are coming back. We do need to research that further, so that's an excellent question, and we can take that under advisement and try to press on that issue.
Thank you. Any other questions? And our appreciation from the commission. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next up, Chief Deputy Barnes with the monthly presentation of the police department operations. Morning.
Morning. Chief Bliven sends his regrets from a Mexican beach that he can't be here right now. I'm sure he feels really bad about that. So good morning, everyone. You have the monthly operational report put together by Chief Bliven. Only one change when reviewing it. You'll look at the overtime page in there, and that's fourth quarter of 2021. The easy answer is the overtime spent in the first quarter of 2022 is about $110,000. It's our largest quarter for overtime spending due to union contract in our in-service. One of our 2 in-service days is paid at overtime to our entire staff. So that's representative in that $110,000 in the first quarter. I'm sure that'll get updated in the next operational report that you see. Otherwise, I'd just like to highlight a few things in the chief's message that are really impacting us significantly right now. And the first one is the amount of time and effort our staff are spending dealing with a homeless population in Wausau. I would say we're not making significant progress as a community because we're dealing with issues involving homeless individuals more frequently. And the level of response or the level of the issue that we're dealing with has become more significant. More issues with biohazards, more issue with behavior that would probably shock everyone in the room, including violence. So that's something that our officers are dealing with daily. It's something that over the next month we'll be putting together presentations. I was asked for the next Public Health and Safety Committee. They want to see, and we have body cameras, so they kind of need to buckle up because what they're going to see is I think going to challenge them to come up with policy solutions because something has to change in order for our downtown in Wausau to thrive. So that's something that we're preparing for. In the next month, we'll be asking the city council to authorize a position to take the place of the work that we had Officer Eric Lemeron doing as a homeless outreach individual. We believe that person can be a non-sworn position. So we have a little bit of work to do with human resources, and then that'll be going to their committee and potentially to the council within the next month. So it'll be interesting to see how we move forward, but something needs to be done. And then we're pleased that over the last month or so, we've received guilty pleas and avoided trials in some big homicide cases. One of the things that the average individual wouldn't realize is how much staff time, not only for the district attorney's office, but for our staff, it takes to send one of these cases to trial. So in each of those cases, there's about a month of an investigator for us who works out of the district attorney's office and preparing witnesses and participating in all those meetings, as well as every single officer has to be prepped for trial. So that's several hours. So as the court system was shut down for a year and a half or operated very sparingly during COVID, now there's a push to get all these cases to trial. So we have staff that we spend an incredible amount of time at the district attorney's office preparing for those trials. You have all the data and statistics. This is the operational report. Are there any questions on it?
Glad to see that you're handling this homeless. My question again is, the city council is aware of it, and they're going to have to hire some people that.
Well, I would say everyone from a policy standpoint is aware that we have homeless individuals that live in the city. The actual impact on the businesses and in the city-owned parking ramps and in our parks, by the end of the next month, they'll be fully aware of the issues we're dealing with, and then we can start having conversations about things within their control from a policy governance standpoint that we think might make positive impacts in helping us deal with that population of individuals.
Good.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll move on to our second item, update on investigative review. This will be very brief. The report we got is that it's on schedule to be completed within the time frame that was initially provided.
Okay, good.
Any other questions, discussion? Then our gratitude from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next meeting will be scheduled for Monday, May 23rd at 7:30 a.m. And that is it on the agenda. Is there any further discussion? If not, may I please have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.